Well, good morning, Carterville Christian Church. How you guys doing this morning? Okay, there you go. You're here. We're here. Happy Father's Day. I know it's already been said, but happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, all the father figures out there. Man, so thankful to have you here with us in person here or online. So glad you're worshiping with us today. I think it's only appropriate, and I don't want anybody to be to not have enough ammunition. I don't want any of the dads in the room to not have enough ammunition for today on the dad joke front. So I wanted to start with a few dad jokes this morning. I think that's appropriate. Don't you think that's appropriate this morning? So I got a couple for you. What has 5 toes and is not your foot? Well, it'd be my foot, of course, right? What is blue and not very heavy? Well, light blue, of course. And what is green and has wheels? Well, grass, but I lied about the wheels. So there's some dad jokes for you. No, seriously, do something nice for your dad today. You know, write him a card, let him take a nap, take him to a nice restaurant. If you don't know where to take him, I heard there's a great new restaurant on the moon. It's got great food, but a terrible atmosphere, okay? That's the last one. Promise, that's the last one, okay? But man, so thankful for you guys. So thankful for all the dads in here who provide for us, who care for us, who love us. And man, we love you. We're so thankful for you in this room. Man, we started this new series, For the Love. And we're talking about really principles of generous living. We're talking about our money. And honestly, last week is kind of like the starting point of everything that we're going to be talking about for the rest of this series. So if you missed last week, I would highly encourage you to go back. It's on our YouTube page. Go back and watch that message, because really you're going to kind of be lost as we continue to move forward. And we're going to be missing the most important piece of this entire thing if we missed last week. Because last week we talked about who our God is and what kind of concern he has when it comes to our money, when it comes to our generosity, when it comes to our giving. We talked about who he is, and we're asking this question, ultimately, trying to answer this question throughout this whole series is why? Why do we give? That's the goal of this series, is just for all of us collectively to come to a deeper understanding of why we give. I hope this week that you've had some conversations. Maybe that was with your spouse for the first time ever, talking about why do we give, like really getting down to it. Or maybe it's with your children, an opportunity for you to say, hey, here's why we give. Here's because we trust that our God is going to provide in every circumstance. So we always give him our first and our best. Or maybe you were able to talk with a friend this week and just talk about the generosity of God. Think about the witness you could have by talking about the generosity of God. But we've got these stickers too, and there's more stickers at the communion tables too. So as you're leaving today, you can grab more of these if you didn't get some last week. But really, they just have the theme verse for this whole thing, which is in Matthew chapter 6, when Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." And we were challenged last week to think about, man, what am I really treasuring? What really has my heart? Because that's what I think the Lord is trying to get us to understand, that money is not actually about money, it's about your heart. It's about what has your heart. Like, I think the chief competition when it comes to who has our heart might be our money. It might be our stuff. This might be the number one opponent against God when it comes to who has your heart, or what has your heart, would be our possessions. And there's this, we've been asking this question, right? Why do we give? And ultimately, what has your heart? And if we look through, as you read through the book of Acts, it's like the history of the early church. And it's pretty obvious to tell what or who has their heart. Those first believers, as the church is being established, it's pretty easy to tell who and what has their heart. And it's the Lord. He has their heart completely. And what follows is generosity. That's what follows. There's this verse that kind of pulls it all together in Acts chapter 4. It's going to be up on the screen. This is what it says. Now the full number of those who believed were of one heart and soul. They were unified. And listen to this. And no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, but they had everything in common. Man, this is like exactly what we talked about last week, right? That God is the owner of everything. If God is the owner of everything, we talked about this, right? Psalm 24:1, that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, right? If he is the owner, that means we are not. We are not. That's why they say right here, no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, but they had everything in common. We also talked about how the Lord is the provider of everything, right? That ultimately he's the provider of everything. I can trust in him. If he clothes the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, like I can trust him to provide for my needs as well. And as a result of their trusting in who God is, the early church naturally was a generous church. And the same thing is true of us. When we come to know who our God is, naturally, we become a generous people. Now, here's what I want to do, because we're talking about what has your heart, and ultimately, God doesn't need your money, but he wants your heart. That's what we talked about last week. God doesn't need your money, but he wants your heart. I think there's some things that naturally come out whenever the Lord has our heart. That's where we're going to go today. We're going to talk about some things that naturally flow out of us when we realize that ultimately that my treasure is in heaven. When I put my treasure in heaven, when God has my heart, there are some certain things that come out. The first thing that we see, quite simply, is that when God has our heart, he transforms our minds. When God has our heart, he transforms our minds. You've probably heard Romans 12, 1 and 2, right? Therefore, I urge you, brothers, I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of God, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Notice what Paul is saying here. This is an either or. You are either being conformed to the pattern of the world, or you are being transformed by the Spirit. It's one or the other. There's no middle ground. Either you're intentionally being formed into the image of God and having your minds transformed by who he is and what he is doing in your mind or in your heart, or you are being conformed into the image of this world. There's no middle ground. So if you are not intentionally being formed in the image of God, then by default, you are being conformed to the image of the world. You realize this, right? Like this is what it is. There's not a third option. You're either being shaped by the world or by God. If God has your heart, he transforms your mind. Like this is what happens. And the question when it comes to our money is, what kind of transformation happens in our minds then? What kind of transformation happens when God has our heart? And I think Paul speaks to this in Philippians chapter 2. This is another famous passage. So if there's any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, then complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you not only look to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. See, here's what I believe to be true. Believe that our Bible tells us is that when the Lord has our heart, he transforms our minds to think of others before ourselves. There's a mind shift that happens. And this is countercultural in our world, is it not? Right? We talked about it last week that we live in this bigger barn culture, right? Like this is like if I earn more, it means I can buy something better. I can have the best and the nicest and the shiniest and the brightest. Like this is like I can buy more or better, right? This is what I can do. The world is all about what can I get? But there's a subtle mind shift that happens when the Lord has our heart. Instead of saying, what can I get? We think, what can I give? That's what a disciple says in every situation, in every relationship. In every scenario, it's not what can I get out of this? What's in it for me? It's what can I give? What can I selflessly give of myself in this situation? Whether that is time or resources or money or energy or whatever it might be, what can I give? And there's a lot of people who have been great examples of this mindset. But one man that I can't get out of my mind when I think of this mindset is a guy named Mike Burleson. Several of you know Mike, knew Mike. Mike passed away several years ago, served here faithfully in this church, served as an elder for many years in this church. He had like this infectious laugh, like gut laugh, and this smile that would just brighten up a room. And he shared it with everybody. He was affectionately known as Mr. Mike to gobs of kids that would come through the ministry because he would sit by the front doors, you remember, and he would have, and some kids called him the gummy man because he had fruit snacks there for every kid who wanted one, right? Literally filled this backpack and handed out gummies to every kid that came through our ministry. I remember several times him recognizing that one of my daughters had not got a fruit snack that morning, so he would chase me down at the end of church and make sure I took one home to her so she didn't feel left out, so she wasn't sad. Now, thinking about the kind of person Mike was, I can't help but think of generous. Like he had this mindset shift. Instead of always thinking, what can I get? What can I get? What can I get? It was always, what can I give? It was always that for Mike. This is what he does. And I know for a fact that Mike, that he loved the Lord with his whole heart, and he realized that to be a follower of Jesus means that I changed my mind from what can I get to what can I give. I can remember one specific time I was interning. When I was interning here, I was like, it was the last Sunday before I was actually going home for a week before I would start my internship. And I'm not lying, I was bad with money, okay? So I had like $8 in my bank account, okay? I had less than half a tank in my little GMC Jimmy, my 88 GMC Jimmy, baby blue. Man, that thing was the best car ever, you know? And could not get to 85, like just wasn't gonna get there even though I pushed it to try to get there on the highway. It would not get to 85, you know? It would start shaking violently if I tried to get there. But I had less than half a tank, $8. I was thinking maybe I can get a couple more gallons of gas and that'll get me home. Then my parents will fill up my car when I get home or something, you know, like trying to. Mike didn't know my situation at all, but knew I was a broke college kid. Came up, handed me a $50 bill and said, hey, you just let me know if you need anything. And he didn't realize the burden that he lifted by a $50 bill that he handed me in church that day. But it was crazy. Right? Because he entered into the situation with not what can I get, but what can I give, right? Not that this little 21-year-old college kid had anything to offer me at that point, right? But what can I give? What can I give away? There were probably 4 other times that summer that Mike found me at church and said, hey, follow me to Casey's after church, and filled up my car right over here. But Mike wasn't just generous with his money, he was generous with his time. I mean, he gave up vacation to come invest in incoming freshman boys at a week of CIY Move in Colorado. Not only that, but he got up on stage and was in the talent show dancing to NSYNC with other students on the talent show, right? Like him and Cheryl opened up their home so that kids could come hang out and swim at their home. He generously offered encouragement at just the right time whenever I needed it as a young minister getting his feet wet. I mean, it's obvious interacting with Mike for all those years that the Lord had his heart. And when the Lord has your heart, he transforms your mind to think, not what can I get, but what can I give? What can I give in this situation? When our treasure is in heaven, when the Lord has our heart, he transforms our mind. But he also, he opens our eyes. This is what God does when he has our heart. He opens our eyes. Like he not only transforms our hearts or transforms our minds, but he opens our eyes. Jesus tells this story in Luke chapter 10. That's a pretty well-known story. It starts with this lawyer coming and testing Jesus, is what the text says. That this guy came to test Jesus and says, hey, what should I do to inherit eternal life? What should I do? And Jesus says, well, what is written in the law? What do you think? You know, like kind of knows what's going on in this situation. It's no surprise there. He is fully God in this moment. And he knows the state of this guy's heart. And he says, what does the law say? And this man answers pretty well, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus actually says, well, that's good. Good job. Go this, do this, and you will live, is what he says. And it seems like the interaction would be over. But again, Jesus is fully aware of the state of this man's heart. And this man asks another question. It says in verse 29, but he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? One author said it this way, if you have to ask who is my neighbor, then you're probably not a great neighbor. Right? And if you're trying to define the term neighbor, then you're likely trying to justify not doing more than you have to in order to love that person. Right? You're trying to limit, to diminish the demands that are put on you in order to love your neighbor. And Jesus, of course, fully aware of this, this is what he responds with. He tells a story. Let's read together starting in verse 30. Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. This is not the surprising part of the story. The road, everybody knew the road from Jerusalem to Jericho was a dangerous one after all. You don't travel alone on this road, but that's what this man is doing, and he is stripped and beaten and left half dead on the side of the road. And now, but the good news, there's somebody right around the corner. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that same road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place, he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Now, you can almost hear the thoughts of the clergymen in this text, can't you? Like as they see the man lying half dead on the side of the road, and as they pass by on the other side, you can almost hear them thinking, man, somebody should do something about that. And somebody should help that man. He is obviously hurt, obviously wounded, obviously in need of help. Somebody should do that. When I first started coming to church here, I came with my sister, Morgan. And my sister, Morgan, is a boss. She's very bossy. That's what I mean, okay? She's very bossy. And the reason why I came to church here is because my sister said, hey, you're coming to church with me. We're going there. She was a boss, right? She was bossy. And the reason why I started helping in Station 419 as a college kid is because my sister said, you're going to do this. She was bossy. And the reason why I went on different trips and events, or why I even volunteered to teach in Station 419 or volunteered to lead a group or lead communion time, was because my sister always volunteered me. This is what she did. I actually won an award, these satirical awards that we would give out in college. And the award that I won, the Willie Award, was, you're not the boss of me, my sister is. That's the award I got, right? This is who my sister was. She just bossed me around, and she would volunteer me for everything. I heard a story of these two young boys that walk into a dentist office, and one of them just bravely says, I need a tooth taken out. I don't have much time. So I don't want it deadened. I don't want it any of the numbing stuff. I don't want gas or anything. We just need it. I just need it gone so we can be on our way. And the dentist is like, well, that's really brave of you. Which tooth is it? And he turns to his friend and says, Albert, show him the tooth, right? And this is sometimes what we do. Right? This is kind of what the priest and Levite are getting at here as they walk by this man. Man, somebody should do something about that. It's too bad I don't have time for that right now. Somebody should help that poor man on the side of the road. Man, I gotta get going, right? This is gonna make me ceremonially unclean, right? All the washing, I wouldn't be in time for service back in Jericho, right? This is what's happened. We even sometimes we use God as a crutch in this. If we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we think, God, why don't you just fix this problem? And we take it to him and we say, Lord, or we at least say, I'm gonna pray on your behalf, right? Can you imagine how helpful that is for the priest and Levite to say, praying for you, buddy, as they walk by? This guy who's half dead on the side of the road, can you imagine? They're just saying, praying for you, man. It's got no implications on the here and now present situation that he finds himself in, right? And sometimes we do that. But I think the Lord would say, no, you are my hands and feet. You are my witnesses here and now in the present moment. Are your eyes open to see what is in front of you? Mark Scott points out that these men are heading from Jerusalem to Jericho. Notice the order. From Jerusalem to Jericho, from a place of worship, on their way home. They're leaving church and they're walking past the needy. And they're just saying, man, somebody should take care of that. Are we the same kind of church? The same kind of people that are leaving from here and just passing on by? Jesus continues. This is what he says in verse 33. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him. Whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Now Jesus then looks at the lawyer and says, which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers. And this lawyer can't even say the Samaritan. He says, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. Can you imagine Jesus saying to this Jewish lawyer, go be like the Samaritan? Can you imagine him saying that to him? Can you imagine everybody being like, I'm glad he didn't say that to me, but that's what he's doing. Like he's telling us, go be like the one who proved to be the neighbor. Like open your eyes. Like I'm thinking, like what does this mean? I think it means to open your eyes to see the needs of those around you. I think that's how you prove to be a neighbor, is by opening your eyes to see those around you. I read about these tribes in the northern part of South Africa and they have this greeting. And it's the equivalent of saying hello in English. And I'm going to mess this up bad, okay? But I just want to communicate this to you. This is what they say. The one person will say, Sawubona. That's what they will say, which literally means, I see you. That's how they will say hello, is I see you. And then the other, if you're a member of the tribe, you will respond by saying Sikona, which means I am here. Now, what's interesting, the interesting part about these two things is that the order of exchange is important, because you don't respond with Sikona, I am here, unless somebody says Sawubona, I see you. It's almost as if you seeing somebody brings them into existence. You realize the power of your eyes, right? When your eyes are opened, when the Lord has your heart, like when your eyes are open to see people, you're literally giving them worth as you see them. You literally are bestowing the real image that they have as a child of God. You are giving that to them whenever you look intently at them. This is what the Good Samaritan does. You see somebody as an image bearer, as a son and daughter of the King. And by seeing them, you quite literally, you bring them into existence in that very moment. Like that's the power you have by opening your eyes. And when God has your heart, he opens your eyes. Not to see the needy as a burden, but to see them as who they are, a child of God, as a son and daughter of the King. When God has your heart, he transforms your mind and he opens your eyes. But he also, when God has your heart, he gives you his. Ultimately, that's what happens. When the Lord has your heart, he replaces your heart of stone with his heart, one that is ultimately leads to life change in us. See, here's the deal. With opening our eyes and with transforming our minds, those are great things, but honestly, they don't really lead to action in our lives, right? Like they don't really necessarily lead us to do anything. But you can see this evident in the story of the Good Samaritan that we just went through, that it wasn't just opening his eyes, but he had a different heart. Like that's the main difference of the priest and the Levite and the Samaritan in the story. It's, yeah, sure, their ethnicity, or sure, their job, or whatever their tasks they had to complete that day. But ultimately, the difference was inside of them. They had a different heart. The Samaritan had a different heart than that priest and that Levite that walked by. He had a heart that was filled with compassion. That same word in Luke chapter 10 is used in Matthew chapter 9. When Jesus saw the crowd, he saw them and he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And he says, the harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few. Ask, ask, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into the harvest field. And as those workers are sent out, they are sent with that same heart. That's what happens. We are sent with that same heart of compassion. And this heart of compassion, you know what it leads to? It leads to great sacrifice. At least that's what we see in Luke chapter 10. Like, think about all the layers of sacrifice that this Good Samaritan gave, right? Not only his money, but his time, his resources, his energy, his priorities. You don't think this guy was also busy? You don't think he had something else to get to? Something better to be doing than caring for this man? Of course he did. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got things to do. But he realized if the Lord has my heart, then he gives me his, which is a heart of compassion that is led to action. James chapter 2 says it this way: what good is it, my brothers, if someone says that he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, it's dead. Guys, this is where the rubber meets the road for us. Like, if the Lord has our heart, he gives us his. A heart that is filled with compassion, that is moved to action. He gives us this. And we don't just say, go in peace, be warm and filled. No, but we make sure it happens. I'm thankful for a church that makes sure it happens. Last week, I don't know if you realized this, last week there was a table set up in the atrium that's not set up in there anymore, because all of the kids that are going to CIY Move have been partnered with by our church. Yeah, that's awesome. That's worth celebrating, right? Because we're not just going to say, hey, go and be warm and filled to those students. We're going to say, hey, we got something we can do to help. We got a way that we can get in here. We have some action behind what we're doing here, right? This is the truth. Is there will be other people in heaven because of where your treasure is right now. There will be people in heaven because of where you're putting your treasure right now. You realize that? Because you said, you know what? I'm going to give so this student can go experience this life-changing week-long event. You know, there will be others in heaven because you supported your church and people came and heard the gospel. There will be others in heaven because you generously gave to a missionary who took the gospel to an unknown part of the world. There will be others in heaven because you were generous with your time and your energy to invest in somebody's life. Like, this is what will happen. When God has your heart, he gives you his heart, one that's filled with compassion, that leads to action. When our treasure is in heaven, our minds, they think of others first. We go into every relationship, every situation, not thinking, what can I get, but what can I give? When our treasure is in heaven, our eyes are open to see the needs that are around us. Not to see them and walk by on the other side of the road, but to see them and stop and help, because we have been filled with this new heart, one that's filled with compassion, that is led to meet those needs. And why do we give? We give for the love of each other, for the love of our neighbor. That's why we give. Here's the deal. I think sometimes we feel stuck. We can feel stuck when it comes to giving because we see the need. We might see the need and think, man, I want to help, but I don't think that what I can give is going to make that big of a difference, right? Or we see the need and like, I don't even know where to start, or like the need is far greater than what I can provide, or like I want to give, but I don't think I'll be able to give in the way that they really need me to. And so many times, even though all these things, they might be legitimate. Those might be legitimate things that you're thinking even right now. Like, I want to give, but I don't even know where to start. Or I don't even, is it really going to make a difference, what the little thing that I give? Do you remember the widow's mite? She brings in those 2 small copper coins, and Jesus says she's given more because she gave out of the little that she had. You give out of your abundance, but she gave out of barely anything that she had. Like, this is what we're talking about. I think sometimes we can get stuck with those questions of, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start, or I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. Can I give you some encouragement? It's in Acts chapter 4. It's where we started. Remember, no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, but they had everything in common. That text continues. It says, with great power, the apostles were giving their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them. For as many as were owners of lands or houses, they sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. Listen to this man in verse 36. Thus Joseph, who was also called by the apostles Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, a Levite, native of Cyprus, sold a field that belonged to him. He brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. This guy, Barnabas, is the first contributor in the New Testament. He's the first one who gave to this new church. He's the first one that we know of. Notice what it says. It doesn't say that Barnabas gave money and it provided for every need. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't even say that Barnabas, his money was the answer to every problem. No, it doesn't say that. But what's clear is that the Lord had his heart. And because the Lord had his heart, he entered that situation with, man, I don't really have money, but I got this field. I'm not doing anything with it. It's kind of just sitting there. It's like hand me down from my family. I could probably, there's some people in need here. I could probably do something about this. I'm gonna sell this and give it. Right? Because he entered the situation not saying, what can I get, but what can I give? And he had eyes to see the need around him, and he had a heart that was filled with compassion that led him to action. And it didn't make all the difference, but it did make difference. Like it wasn't the end all, be all, right? That's not what the text says. It was just, but it did make a difference. Like it did meet a need. Even no matter how small it might be, it still can make a difference. I read a story about this man, this old man who used to walk like early in the morning on the beach next to his house, right? So he would get up and go walk, and he was up early one morning. There had been a big storm that rolled through the night before, and he goes out to walk on this beach, and as he goes out to walk, he notices immediately that there are just thousands of starfish that are littered all over this beach. Like as far as the eye can see, both directions. It's like this is kind of crazy. He starts walking up the beach and he can see up ahead this figure up ahead that's just kind of like just walking kind of towards him. It's what it seems like. And every once in a while this figure kind of stops and bends over, picks something up and throws it into the ocean. And as he gets closer, he says, well, good morning. He realizes it's this little boy, and he says, well, good morning. What can I ask? What are you doing? And this little boy said, well, I'm throwing starfish back into the ocean. They got washed up from the storm. The sun's getting ready to come out. When the sun comes out, I'm going to dry them up and kill all of them. Like there's no way they can get back into the ocean. So I've got to do it. And this man said, well, that's pretty cool of you, but you realize there are thousands of starfish here. Like, what difference are you really going to make? The little boy kind of just looked at him, and he bent back down, grabbed another starfish, and threw it as far as he could out into the ocean. He said, I made a difference to that one. What you are able to do, what you're able to give, it might not make difference to thousands, but it might make difference to that one. And according to the math of heaven, that is worth it. I think if Jesus was preaching this sermon, I think he would end it this way. I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Truly, I say to you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me. Do what you can. It will make a difference. Even if it's to one, it makes a difference. When the Lord has your heart, and he transforms your mind, and he opens your eyes, and he fills you with his heart that is just filled with compassion. So filled with compassion that he went all the way to the cross for you and for me. He didn't think about what can I get from these people. No, but what can I give? His eyes were open to see our condition, and his heart was moved to you and to me. This is who our God is. This is the God that we worship, and this is the God that we try to model our lives after. Let's be a church that gives for the love of our neighbor. Let's stand and let's sing together this morning.